Hey friends, Varun here from the Red Music Box, and welcome back to part 3 of All About EQ. In this episode, we are going to look at some of the practical examples of using an EQ and getting by it, and also look at some of the myths and see if they're true or not. We've now understood what is an EQ, why do we need an EQ, what is the EQ mindset, and what happens to analog EQ emulations, and what about presets? Which one is the right kind of EQ for me? And then we've also kind of touched upon the context of using an EQ. And today we're going to be looking at some of the pointers and also going to dive into a session to demonstrate those pointers to understand how you can actually put this to use in your sessions. The first pointer is what I would like to call as the good, the bad, and the ugly. Basically, what it means is you'll have to identify the good frequencies within a sound, the bad and the dirty frequencies within a sound. And that is very important for you to understand what frequencies are you supposed to retain and which ones are you supposed to notch or cut off from your sound. The second point that I want to make is match the levels. When you start using plugins like EQ and compression, you are bound to change the volume levels. The volumes are either going to go up or going to go down depending on whether you're cutting a lot of frequencies or you're boosting a lot of frequencies. Watch out for your makeup gain on your compression and stuff like that. So what you want to do is always, after you're done processing a certain channel, suppose you're working on vocals and you add your EQ, you add your compressor, you add your de-esser, and I don't know, maybe you want to saturate your vocals a bit, you try and add a saturation plugin. Once you're done with all these, if you could quickly just A/B with the plugins and without the plugins and make sure that your gain levels are not changing a lot. There is bound to be some kind of a difference, but if it's very marginal, it's still okay. But if you can get it to balance perfectly, then nothing like it. But even if it's going up and down, if it's really like a marginal difference, you can still ignore it and make up for it, but not otherwise. Because otherwise, soon you're going to see your stereo bus or your master bus starts clipping, and that's not the point. Then you've disturbed the entire gain staging process that you went through in the beginning of your mix. The third point I want to really drive or dig in is focusing on the context. Now, what do I mean by context? First thing, if you really want to understand context, start listening to all kinds of music. Listen to kinds of music that you are most uncomfortable with, even if it means you have to listen to electronic music. Suppose you're a live musician and you don't like electronic forms of music, give it a listen, learn it. Try to understand what are the things that happens within an electronic music. And if you're an electronic musician and you only love working with samples, do check out live bands. They help you be a lot more informed about how you are meant to choose certain kind of tones for a song that falls under one of these categories. And if you really want to be a good producer, then you have to be listening to anything and everything with an open mind. It's extremely important that you do this, because when you start choosing the right kind of tones for your song at the writing stage, at the arrangement composition stage, you will find it so much more easier in your mixing stage, because you're not struggling as much trying to dial those tones in post. And especially if you chose a wrong kind of tone in the beginning to start with, and then you are trying to fix it by using plugins to fix and get a certain kind of tone. I'm sorry, my friend, that's just a completely wrong approach to take. And that's possibly the single biggest reasons why you're not able to get your songs to sound the way you want it to sound. Let's look at this session and see how we can bring about a separation between the kick drum and the bass using EQ. So I've loaded a stock EQ here so that kind of becomes easier for us to follow along. And there are 3 bass tracks. One is a DI and 2 are different microphones as I've named here, miking the same amplifier. And I've chosen to use all 3 for now. And all of them are sent to a bus so that it's easier for us to process all 3 at the same time. Let's hear the kick. What I've done is created a little bell curve boost just to identify where is the strongest area, the region, frequency region for my kick drum. not there. You see, roughly around 58 hertz is where I'm hearing that boom, that bigness of that kick coming through. Now, of course, I don't need to boost it 16 dB, but to hear it and to be sure of it, I've boosted it 16 dB. You see, that's where you hear it the strongest. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave this as is for a moment, go to the bass bus and load the same EQ there. And we are going to take the exact 58.4 region. Let's just put it as 58, that's fine. And we are going to make a cut in that area, like a very gentle cut, maybe not too thing. Now, what happens is, of course, we don't need this boost. We can bring it back to 0. And let's hear and see if it's any better now. First is without EQ. You see, it automatically kind of creates it's subtle move, but you can hear that the kick is cutting through a lot better. Let me bring in all the other mics because now you're going to hear the kick bleeding through the overheads and the room mics and all of it. So let's just bring everything. See, you automatically hear that. To accentuate it a little more, you could boost that strong area in the kick. And then, now another thing that you could do is also find out the area that you don't want in the kick drum, you know. So one of the things I know because of doing this for a while is kick tends to suffer very badly between this 300 to 500 range. That's where the kick begins to sound like some kind of a almost like a cardboard box, and I just hate that sound. So let's try and bring in this thing and see if we could identify that range. There you go. Starts around here. It gets bad. It gets worse there. See, that's the bad and the ugly part of the frequency region. Let's pull that out. I definitely don't want it, you know. And also, if you want, you could have the beater attack come through a little more because that will help you help the kick drum cut through even alongside other instruments that are playing in the track as well, which I've muted and made it inactive for now. Let's try and find the beater attack region somewhere in this high mid area. Oops. Just about there. But it tends to sound a little clicky for me here, a bit too clicky for me. But if I boost it a little more, and I mean, if I just push the frequency around here, I think it sounds a little more sweeter. See there? If I remove it, yeah, it's nice, but it's not as harsh as being here, for example. Just sounds really harsh. Maybe I would choose to boost somewhere around there, but again, not so much. There you go. So that pretty much kind of forms a basic EQ setting for my kick drum. And what I want to do also is make sure this input and output are metering out the same level. And I'm not, because of the boosts and the cuts that I've made, I've not ended up increasing the volume of my kick. It has increased, if you see here. So what do I do now? To make up for it, let's bring the output gain down. It's a lot more closer. Fabulous. Now, when I do a before and after, you'll see that my kick volume remains the same. You see what's happening is the volume is the same, and it's just because of the EQ moves, the kick is actually cutting through a lot better than it did before. And that's what I mean by using EQ to help your kick and bass kind of separate out and make space for each other. We could also try and tweak the bass a little more, and it helps to be mindful of what frequencies we boosted in the kick so that we could try and uh, work with the bass very similarly. Let's keep them side by side here, and just for now, let's just quickly loop a section. The bass seems to sound more fuller in that area, so we can boost there. And because the kick's beta attack is coming through stronger because of this boost we have made here, even though the bass, I'm boosting this region in the bass track, you see because of this, it cuts through. Let me just try and remove that, and then you see what happens again. You see, it doesn't have the same effect again. Now it's back. And even the bass, if you're working on some kind of a rock track, where you really want that the fret sound and the finger hitting the strings and all of that to kind of come through, you could try and boost the high region. But for a song like this, which is more ballady, I don't need that sound to come through, but I'm just going to show it to you any which way. Ah, by the way, yeah, you start hearing it right about there. But like I said, I don't think for this song I really want the bass to have that sort of a thing. But again, you see, I really had to boost it so high to start hearing it. Sometimes that's what I mean. The curves could actually start scaring you. But the point is, don't go by how big or small the curve looks. Just go by the sound that you want, because you can always output match it after you make that boost. I kind of like this warm bass sound, so I'm just going to keep it like this. I'm not really going to do much with it. And also, I have not compressed these at all. So once I compress it, they kind of become a lot more even. You see here, some of these, this is a slightly softer kick, and this is loud again. So we can sort of even it a little more. That kind of makes things a lot better. But I hope this helped you get an idea of how you can use EQ to help bring clarity between the kick and bass. Okay, we're gonna try and do something similar with our snare and our electric guitars, so that they don't fight for space in the same way. So I've pulled all the electric guitar into a bus. I'm just going to, for now, put it next to the snare track, so it's kind of easy for me to see it back and forth. And you see on the electric guitar, I have chosen to cut everything below 126 hertz because I don't want that frequency range. And also, I have made a small dip around here, around 330 range. And what I want to kind of do is find if the snare can benefit in that range, roughly around that range. And I've tried to create a little boost around this area. Just let's see what happens in this range with the snare. Now that's the slight, uh, like I said, a cardboard frequency range that you find in the snare. Let's just narrow it. Yeah, I don't like that. I'm going to keep the Q a little wide. I'm going to pull that down firstly. And then what I'm going to do is, because of that, the snare tends to feel a tad bit thinner. So we can try and find the body of the snare in this region and boost it up so that okay, and this helps the snare have its own space, like a nice body to it. Obviously nothing is compressed, so I'm kind of still fighting for a little bit of inconsistency in levels, but I'm just trying to show you EQ here. You could make the snare a little more brighter. I think that would help. I was trying out a little shelf sort of a thing here. Let's just see what happens. Yeah, it's nice. Let's volume balance this now. You see that when the loop starts, actually the snare is very okay volume wise. It's just that later I think it's becoming a bit inconsistent level wise. You see this a little thing happening here. That's what is affecting it, but that can be handled with compression. Yeah, I would leave it kind of roughly over there and then tackle the rest with compression. And we make sure that the electric guitar doesn't have any boost. So we could do this in volume balance, but you know what? I think without volume balance is okay because it's kind of pushing the overall output of the electric guitar, and that's not kind of what I want. I don't want to disturb the balance that I kind of had previously. I hope that again gives you a decent enough idea of how you can go about using EQ and carving out space for different instruments. So the trick here is to really study the different instrument ranges to try and understand roughly where in your recording session in the tracks that you have, roughly where do they dominate, and where are the good frequencies, where are the bad frequencies, the ones that you need to pull out. So it helps to just use that EQ sweep technique to find out where these things rest, and that hopefully gives you an idea of how you can go about carving out space. This is again like a very rough thing. I would definitely spend more time trying to get these things right, but I hope this still gives you a good enough idea. Okay, let's look at myth or not. Now, these are things that I've been advised either by the internet or actual people who I met, and they've advised these things to me in the past. And over the years of learning and continuing to learn and continuing to grow that I'm doing each day, I wanted to share some of the things that I felt are true and some of it that I don't agree with. So let's go through the pointers. Point one: don't EQ tracks in solo mode. Now, yes, this definitely helps you make better decisions if you can learn how to EQ with the rest of the tracks playing alongside, because it helps you understand whether the EQ moves that you're making is helping in the mix context. However, sometimes when you need to do surgical EQ and when you really need to try and find a certain frequency that's bothering you, you have to solo and go a little more microscopic, and that's perfectly fine. So don't be so tough on yourself. Don't boost don't boost or cut more than 3 dB. False, outrightly false. If you want a certain sound and that demands you to make bold decisions, then go after it. EQ before compression always. Not necessary. I do believe the sound is a bit different if you put an EQ first or if you choose to put a compression first. The way the plugins behave changes, especially the compressor. And especially, for example, if you are loading a compressor on a bass synth kind of a instrument, and you have not notched out the frequencies that you don't want in that synth any which way, then your compressor, in case if there are powerful lows in that track, then your compressor is definitely going to start jumping in or start compressing the track way sooner than if you had cut out all those frequencies and then allowed the compressor to kick in. So I think it behaves a bit differently. Try it out, use extremely drastic settings and try it out, and then maybe you'll be able to hear these differences yourself. The next one is use your ears and not your eyes. A big yes to this. So I used to struggle with looking at the EQ curves and making my mixed decisions, because I used to be like, oh my God, that curve looks so ridiculous. I don't think I want to EQ a track like so much. That just looks really bad. Oh no, like I've never seen others on YouTube or wherever it is, who EQ their tracks and their EQ curves look so weird, like Mount Everest. So if that's what you're struggling with, then the solution to that, which I was told, and it helped me a lot, is switch to a channel strip plugin. Stop using an EQ with a graph on it, and that will start helping you make bold decisions more confidently. Always cut everything below 100 hertz. That isn't true. Again, people end up doing this. They end up notching everything below 100 hertz on all the tracks on the session. And I think you'll soon realize that it takes the life out of your instruments. And not always do you need to remove everything below 100 hertz on every single channel on your session. You don't need to do that. So please be careful when you're EQing. Don't blindly follow these tips. Try it and hear it for yourself and see the cumulative effect of the moves that you have done across all the tracks and how it sounds in a mix context. That's the best way to judge it. And two more left. EQ in mono. Now, this one is amazing because it really helps you achieve a good separation in your session. So, if you collapse your session into mono and then you start making your EQ decisions, and you're able to achieve a separation between your electric guitars, your snare drum, and your vocals, because they always fight for space. And similarly, the kick drum and the bass guitar, they fight for space. And sometimes, if you have some kind of a synth or something that is kind of like fighting for space with your bass or maybe with your guitars, if you're able to make space for these things in mono, that means when you bring it back to stereo, you're definitely going to hear a lot more separation. You're going to hear the tracks sound much more spread out, and you will definitely find a lot more openness in your track. And it kind of like, as people say, it blooms. It sounds more open and airy and all of that. So give that a shot. I believe EQing in mono helps a lot. The last one happens to be narrow Q for cuts and broad Q for boosts. Yes, this is generally a thumb rule that when you're starting off, at least, that if you're cutting frequencies in an EQ, then use a narrow Q. And if you're cutting frequency, if you're boosting frequencies, then use a broader Q, because it tends to sound more natural, because that's sort of how our ears perceive sound. So it makes it feel more natural. But however, if you are working on some kind of a soundscape thing, or you're trying to recreate a sound, you're doing some sort of a sound design thing, feel free to break the rules and see what happens. At best, it's not going to work. You just have to bypass the plugin and you're back to where you were before. So you're not really losing as much by giving these things a shot. So do try them out. I really hope that you benefited from these 3 videos that I made on EQ. I didn't plan on making 3 videos, to be honest, but it's such an important topic. And there were so many things that I struggle with when it comes to EQ, and I really did want to share these things, and hence it ended up becoming a 3-part series. But nevertheless, I still hope that you found all the help you've needed with EQ. If there is something that you feel that I have not addressed in these videos, then please do leave a comment, and I'll be more than happy to shed light on whatever it is that you wish to know. And thank you for staying with me, and do feel free to leave your thoughts below in case you don't agree with me, because I'm okay with that too. I'm perfectly fine, because I do believe there is no right and wrong way in audio, and everybody has their own approach. So leave your thoughts, even if you agree or don't agree, whatever it is that you feel, and let's engage in a healthy conversation on this. So thank you anyway once again. So do subscribe to my channel and hit the bell, please, because that will notify you whenever there's new content every single week. And I'll see you soon in another video episode. Until then, don't forget to create, play, and record.